This one came to me quite easily and quickly, and I can find myself fighting it, saying, "Yemi, that's lame." So I'm going to share it anyway because I wanted to be vulnerable. What I want listeners to leave with today is that you are deeply loved, like deeply, deeply loved by someone, by something. And if you can just continue to believe that, the work and the courage will come effortlessly.
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for parents to seek the same in their own lives while striving to be the best versions of themselves each day. No matter who you are or where you came from, with increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about, while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show is The Importance of Cleaning Our Trauma with Yemi Penn. Yemi is an author, documentary producer, speaker, engineer, and all-around fearless thought leader on creating your own memo. She is working tirelessly to raise the vibration of acknowledging and healing our individual and therefore our collective trauma. Yemi instigates us all to use our trauma as a catalyst for transformation instead of transference. Yemi has a podcast, Decolonizing Trauma, and her powerful documentary is titled, Did I Choose My Trauma? Yemi, welcome to the show.
Ooh, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate you. And to say I'm excited and curious is an understatement, but we're about to find out why.
Yes, because you're on a mission. You are on a mission. And you describe yourself as a curious rebel with a cause, with grace and compassion.
Yes. Oh, I just needed to pause into that and get my feet on the ground. I am on a mission, and the only way I can sustain this mission, because even just hearing your introduction and the reason behind why you set up this podcast, which just feels so soul fulfilling, and then the introduction of me and my work, we're going to need to operate with grace and compassion, or we are going to burn ourselves out. And I don't want to wrong any previous method, but it's time to change and find that balance of, what some people call sacred rage, and grace and compassion. So yes, I am. And I'm really grateful to have this platform to share that and do more of the work.
The feeling I just received in my chest as you were speaking, I actually had the feeling that I felt when I was listening to your TEDx talk. And you were describing, comparing traumas. And you told the story. I got this, as you said, with grace and compassion. You told the story of the individual whose trauma was being bullied at age 5 with his fish, taking his fish to school, is so excited for show and tell. And the bully knocked it out of his hands, killed his fish. And at age 5, that trauma, we'll talk about big T's and little T's, but that trauma changed the course of how he felt about himself and his place in the world, and impacted all aspects of his life.
Yes.
And here we go through life. So what I was thinking about as you were speaking, as we go through life and we see people acting, reacting, and we often ask that question, like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with that person? And I think of Dr. Perry and Oprah's book, what happened to you?
Happened?
And how compassionate and curious we need to be when it comes to trauma.
Yeah. And we have to start with ourselves, because I think otherwise people don't have a vantage point. That's the word that comes to me. They just don't even have a starting point. And I usually find when people lash out, and myself included, because, I've got to hold this double-sided mirror to whoever I speak to. When I find myself lashing out, or the times in my life where I did say, and sometimes still say, what is wrong with you? It makes me realize, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
treat myself that way. So because I quote unquote messed up as a parent and did this wrong, that's how I treat me.
Mm.
That there's something in the reflection that I actually think can allow us to reach grace and compassion a lot easier than we think. The work still requires work, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm. That's so important because many of us have the critical self-talk
Yeah.
that we would never say what we say to ourselves
Yeah.
to those we love.
Yes.
So it's
Right.
compassion and
Yeah.
self-compassion.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give this quote
Mm,
that you quote
mm,
on that you have on I believe it's your website,
mm.
because it's so much about what you're doing with your podcast, the title of your podcast, and your work and your research, decolonizing trauma. And
Yeah.
it goes like this: trauma decontextualized in an
Yeah.
individual displays as personality,
Yeah.
in a family displays as a family trait,
Mm.
and as a people displays as culture. And that
Whew.
is by Resma Manikim.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, right? Everything is deconstructed. Everything can be and should be
Yes.
deconstructed.
Correct. And that's part of rebellious curiosity, which we might talk about afterwards. And Resma Manikim came up in just my general reading. But then as I started to develop my PhD in the research topic, it was, Yemi, if you're going to have this decolonized view, you need to get different perspectives, because in the research world, you obviously need a lot of peer reviewed papers. But if I think of some of the barriers that come up, say, for teachers who do not come from the West, might, sit within the Black, Indigenous, people of color, it's few and far between. And not suggesting at all that this is the case with Resma Manikim, but it became really important I embodied his work in. Now, the only piece of those words you just read that I'd come across was how decontextualized trauma in a people can be seen as culture. It stopped me in my tracks. But then over time, with the continuation of my research and delving into Resma's work, was actually how, if we just take it from the macro, the culture is the macro, it's the bigger impact. Let's just go back to the individual. How most of us, because of an incident that had happened, a disturbing event, distressing event, trauma, something that has kind of unbalanced you, who you were is no longer who you are today because of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I want to say this with as much equanimity, balance in my voice. I am not righting or wronging all of that. I'm just asking us to get curious. Who
Mm-hmm.
would we be if we hadn't experienced what we did? Who could we be? And that insight that Resma shares is really powerful, and also allows us once again to go back to that grace and compassion. When we look at that family member, when we look at that child, when we look at that parent, even us as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to them? And
Mm-hmm.
what has been decontextualized in how they show up? I mean, I could go on that. I mean, I'm pretty confident that could be a PhD in itself. But just having the language and the words give us how it can be decontextualized allows us to get a bit more curious and say, damn, what else don't I know? So that culture that we constantly see or watch on TV, is that a trauma response? Is
Mm-hmm.
that a form of safety for that people? It's, yeah, it's wow.
Yeah, it is wow. And when we think about, particularly if we look at many indigenous cultures and
Yeah.
the rituals of, and we're going to talk about cleaning, and so I was saying the rituals of cleansing, of
Mm,
dance, of drumming, of somatic touch, and all of these rituals. How many of these rituals came out of having to deal with trauma, right?
yeah.
Having to deal with battle, with loss, with
Yes.
all of the terrible things which still go on at all levels in many places of the world right now. Um, right, and we just see it as our culture.
Yeah.
And as they say, a fish does not know that it's swimming in water,
Mm.
as as we often do not know that we are swimming in a culture,
Yeah.
that it's a thing
Yeah.
that defines us.
Yeah. We just assume it just is because we were born into it. It
Mm-hmm.
just is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where part of the rebellious curiosity comes, which is, hold up, if I just move just a little bit to the left at 12 degrees, what is the different perspective I pick up? And that's a big
Mm-hmm.
part of the decolonization, which I know can potentially be a trigger word for people, and they can attach culture and race to it. And there is parts of that. But
Mm-hmm.
decolonizing in general is just to delink from a dominant and single story.
Mm-hmm.
It's to really shift perspectives and walk around the room as to what an alternative meaning could be to something that we
Mm-hmm.
have just assumed was XYZ for decades and centuries.
And in your research, your doctoral research, and as you talk about needing to go, often we are pushed to the peer-reviewed articles, the
Yeah,
peer-reviewed journals,
yeah,
and we know there's a whole process and a whole culture
mm,
that makes up this type of research. And
yeah,
then there is, as you are finding and talking about, all of the other non-research, non-peer-reviewed
yeah,
ways that people think about trauma or call it
yeah,
something else or
yeah.
heal from it, and you're trying to look at all of these different
Correct,
lenses to
correct.
tell this story.
Correct. I'm trying to be the bridge.
Mm,
I think I'm okay, Dr. Dan. I'm not convinced. I think I'm okay with the fact that the work will not be done by the time I leave my body and this earth. Like, it's
mm,
taken me a while to acknowledge that. But let's
mhm,
just say I accept that I can be the bridge, with the hope that, I don't know, we continue to build sturdier bridges. And maybe this is the engineer in me, which, and one of a friend, or it was an agent I work with in America, said there's this term called pracademic, which is effectively this bridge between academia. And it's not to take away from the amazing work academics, bring into the world, but I'm really interested to say, well, how do we make this practical? How do we make
mhm,
this available to the person who doesn't have the privilege that I currently have when it comes to
mhm,
education and maybe writing papers? So
mhm,
absolutely, I want to give a different perspective, and I think we are getting to a place whereby academia is not being as dismissive.
mhm,
In terms of people who come up with new pieces of work that haven't necessarily gone through the process that it would have in typical higher institutions. So I think
mhm,
we're getting there, slowly, but I believe in us. We'll catch up.
mhm. I think that temporal, thinking about the timing is
Mm,
important, and um, that you're going to be that you're doing your part, and you're going to do as much of it as you can while you
yeah,
can in this
yeah,
body, in this earth. And when we think about, um, I know you have referenced Bessel van der
yeah.
Kolk's work, and I mean, PTSD has not even been around that long. When
I
we just
know.
think about that as an actual syndrome, and in the 70s, really, and then in the 80s, when I think it's first hit the
Yeah.
DSM, the Diagnostic and
Yes.
Statistical Manual,
Yes.
and we have more and more work. So I mean, we're talking, what, 40 years?
Yeah.
40 years,
Yeah.
the foundation of work on
Hmm.
trauma has been
Yeah.
around. And so when you think about, with each decade moving forward, how
Yes.
much it could continue to move and to evolve.
And we are in a delicate dance with that, though, Dr. Dan. We really are, because of, and my friend calls it knowledge obesity, that we are in, where we have so
Hmm.
much information and knowledge that we don't even know how to contain it. And our ability to even hold information for longer than a minute is diminishing. So,
Hmm.
what we don't want to do, as we're finding, is a lot of people using the word trauma. And I usually sit with it and say, let's just sit with the discomfort. And I know we might talk about big T, small t. So,
Hmm.
you're right, it's still very young. I mean, when I go back to the research I did, and and happy for people to prove me wrong, is a lot of this idea of trauma and PTSD came from the war. But I believe it was a British colonel who said, we need to stop talking. It was called shell shocked back then. We
Yep.
need to stop talking about it because it's really taken away the morale and ability for our men, which it was at that time, to go and fight. And so you had decades of the silence, which is when Bessel van der Kolk and some of the other scholars and teachers came about and brought it up. And now we're going into, new territory where, it's the fact that we're saying war veterans, without a shadow of a doubt, experience trauma, but actually we can find similar impacts on the brain and the body in other people. So it's still very new. And I'm just really hoping that the culture of churning things out really quickly just pauses with this, because as you rightly said, this is my mission. And I really think we need to place the concept of cleaning trauma, or any other word, really high in, as a minimum, in some of our sustainable goals that the United Nations talks about, that every country can sign up to.
Yes, this is big,
Yeah.
right? This is a big mission, and
Yeah.
and so important.
Yeah.
As you also point out, the data shows that upwards of 70% of 70% of adults
Yeah.
have experienced a significantly distressing, if not traumatic, event in their
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
7 out of 10 humans.
Correct. And this was data pre-2020, that for most of us in this, generation time of living would have been impacted at some point. And then I apply my decolonizing lens and say, and that's the data that's been collected by institutions and countries that have the capacity to collect data and record it.
Right.
So we've always got to put that other lens on it. So you find very quickly that the 7 out of 10 is probably more. But regardless, the point is, for every 2 people you're walking in, there's at least one of them as an adult that's experienced it. And the number's slightly less for children up to the age of 17 as teenagers. So it's an issue that really should be on every agenda.
To help everyone listening understand you to the degree that I now do from my the research that I have done on you. You courageously talk about your awakening, both in your TEDx talk and, of course, in your documentary.
Yeah.
Please share what you feel comfortable with the listeners, for them to know, how you come to this and for this.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, as I share, for anyone, some people appreciate trigger warnings, and some people say, actually, your trigger warnings make me feel worse. So the fact that I've already said it, I would just invite you to just rock back and forth if you find yourself uncomfortable. I find there's something soothing. There's research out there, especially the decolonizing lens. And for some people, it could just be tapping parts of your body, part of your palm or your collarbone. So the event that I believe is a real catalyst for the work I do and can't quite figure out, even though I don't label myself as a survivor's mission, which is what can I do now with what happened to me, was me as a child. The memory I have, I'm either 7 or 8 years old. And my maternal uncle, effectively abused his sexual power over me. So I was sexually abused. And what's quite interesting, and I want to go there here, Dan, is that when people hear those words, depending on their proximity to this similar type of trauma, can either blank out, or if they haven't experienced it, can say, well, what does sexual abuse mean? What happened? And I probably give a slightly more detail in my documentary, but for my own well-being, I never feel the need to go into detail. I think at some points I will. Like yesterday, I spoke to a friend, and it was the first time in my whole life then that I had actually shared a bit more details as to what had happened. It's taken over 4 decades to actually speak it out because of the shame that's attached to it. And this is probably the most I've ever given in a podcast, because I continue to clean my trauma. It's cleaning, it's ongoing. And this is part of it for me. So that event that I can remember, that I have no doubt was more than one occurrence, is because this uncle, whenever he would come around, I'd have an auntie who would always tease me, oh, look at uncle's favorite girl. So and this is where the mind and the brain did its thing, I guess, to protect me, which was to block it out. But I only have one physical memory of stuff happening. And it still impacts me to today. It
Mm-hmm.
impacts me on so many levels. And the level that I'm still trying to unpack is me as a sexual being. Taken into account, I'm also a parent, which provides this other layer of complexity. But
Mm-hmm.
then just also my relationship with my body, and there'd still be parts of my mind. And that's why the grace and compassion that I operate in is so important, because little Yemi still needs it, and big Yemi still needs it. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and a big part of, I think, how my TEDx talk came about was that happened. I'm sorry it happened. I can't change it. You know, I say this with love for my mum, but I remember when I would have shared with my family again, because I would have said it when I was younger, but I would have shared it again in my 30s. And my mum said to me, "What do you want us to do about it now?" And that hit me hard.
Mm-hmm.
It hit me hard. And probably her saying that, I thought it was a bit insensitive. I now see where and why that came from, because the event has happened. So what am I doing about it now? And I don't say this as a way of gaslighting myself or trying to make it irrelevant, but there's nothing, sadly, I can do about that. So the
Mm-hmm.
question was now, well, what am I now going to do? And as you will probably share, there was more that happened later on in life that really made me realize, oh, that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do about it. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
do something about what happened.
Well, and you've described it as your awakening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I was curious. I'm curious about
yeah.
that. It's an awakening of a dormant.
Yeah.
Right, it's still dormant. It's still
Yeah.
confusing. It's still blocked. It's still
Yes.
trapped. It
Yes.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But yet there's another part of you, since we're so multifaceted,
Mm.
that has an awakening of purpose and mission. And so on
Mm.
the what I noticed from listening to you and watching you, the videos, is there could still be. I just like how you represent, or you express, we can still be confused, locked up,
Mm.
my word, repressed
Yeah.
in aspects of our life, while at the same time completely driven,
Yeah. Oh,
mission, like it's both.
yeah. We can be more than one thing.
Right. You're clearing and
Yeah.
cleaning your trauma while you are moving the needle and
Yeah.
speaking with courage and
Yeah.
rebelliousness about the
Mm.
topic.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I was about to ask, is this recorded so I can listen back to it? But of course it is, because what you just said, you just gifted me something that I think I'm just doing. It feels automatic, but I think there's more charge and energy behind it. But yeah, and I've never been able to put it in words like that. I am doing both, and sometimes it's more than just both of cleaning and clearing and cleansing my trauma, and also trying to offer, and that you've just said is the awakening. That firstly, I
Mhm.
do not have to repress it. Great choice of words. I don't have to repress it, and it doesn't have to be opened up fully. So not everybody who's experienced that or anything else, I feel, has to come out and get on a TEDx stage and talk about it. Everybody's
Mhm.
different. It depends on, I guess, the mission we choose or what it is we want to do. The awakening has probably, I can't admit to saying it's just been one thing and I was like, oh, this is a big deal and I need to do something about it. I feel like life just gave me lots of moments, and being a parent was definitely one of them. And so I think, yeah, it's awakening. It just seems like the continuous
Mhm.
train, doesn't it? It's
Mhm.
the yeah, it's the
It's a
continuous
verb.
journey.
It's a
Yeah,
verb.
yeah,
Yes. So I would like to go back to big T, little t here,
yeah.
because I'm really interested, as someone who is on both sides of this, meaning someone who has experienced the type of trauma that you have, and someone who is
Mm.
paving the way and
Yeah.
banging the drum for
Mm.
all of us. There are these we call big T's and little t's, and historically, I think of big T's, and I found this differential helpful in my work, big
Mm,
T trauma would often lead to a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, often, not always.
mm,
Whereas I found little t's helpful because there was a time, particularly with my decades of working with children, and when we didn't know as much, when we're always trying to apply the adult diagnostic criteria to children, which it's
yes.
different, we now know. And all people, though, would have a trauma. And then if it didn't meet criteria for post traumatic stress disorder, all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, they don't have PTSD. And it was like you just move beyond the trauma and you don't see it the same way when
Mm,
trauma. So little t is still a trauma, but it's often what the outside person would not think of as a big T trauma. So, for example, sexual abuse, your fish dying when you're 5,
yeah, yeah,
right? And to me, this is a very provocative idea that I'm interested in your thoughts when we're comparing
yeah,
traumas based on our, our perceptions of the terribleness of it or the societal terribleness of different acts versus others.
yeah. There's a part of me that wants to put my hand up and say there are people that know way more about this than I do, but I do want to weigh in and give a different perspective because this is part of how we just, yeah, we open up and we
Mhm.
stay curious.
Mhm.
That story I tell of me hearing that man on the stage who was in his 40s and breaking down that his marriage was falling apart, and he links it back to his message to himself of his worthiness, or in this instance, lack of worthiness, because he couldn't save that fish that died. And I saw this man that appeared broken on stage. My brain, honestly, I think did something and has probably never really returned, which was I felt for him. I
Mhm.
felt more for him than I ever had for me for what I had gone through. So
Mhm.
the idea of big T and small t, I wouldn't have had the vocabulary then, just didn't make sense to me and still doesn't. I think I understand it for the need of figuring out who we need to attend to first. You know,
Right.
there's usually a group that needs a bit more attention. But what I struggle with is any form of dismissal. And I
Yeah.
go back to the decolonizing lens. And I saw Bessel van der Kolk. He was in Sydney a couple of weeks ago, and he kind of mumbled and grumbled when a question about the DSM was set up, effectively saying that we are misusing it. It is not being used in the intention at which it was. He didn't give more details. I'm actually speaking at one of his conferences in Boston next month. So I'm hoping there'll be more content on that. But the fact that we seem to try to put people in boxes, that at some point with the big
Mhm.
T and the small t, there has to be a question of the individual who has experienced the big T or the small t. Because I
Right.
promise you, there are people who may appear and actually are living a really wholesome life despite experiencing something that we would call a big T,
Right.
and somebody who's not having experienced the small t. So I think there's space for an introduction of what's a better way for us to deal with this, so that we don't we don't dismiss anybody
Right.
on the small t, because right now I actually think it's harming our world.
And I completely agree with you because my idea, I had been using it in a way of differentiation for the
Mm-hmm.
purposes of more of, I'd say diagnosis when that is relevant or needed based on whatever system we're working in.
Mm,
When I'm seeing it, when I'm conceptualizing, and when I'm trying to, what I hope is make sense of the person's external experience and their internal response. However,
yes.
when you told that story, when I heard you tell that story the other day, um, it totally shifted for me too.
Wow.
I came to a similar um, first pause, confusion, and I was
Yeah.
quite pensive for the rest of the day. And I was thinking, we quantify too much. Like it,
Yeah.
what it to define is to destroy, right? That saying, and
Yeah.
it's like when we try to define it, it loses the
Mm,
essence, and it really is trying to understand a person's experience and the impact that that experience has had on them. Because I totally agree, as I've worked with people over the years who have had what we would call big T's, who, for some reasons of resilience or
mhm,
circumstances that happened,
mhm.
move through life. Whereas
Mm.
others, we are shocked to see the devastating impacts of what we would perceive as something which was a smaller trauma,
Yeah.
because we are so complex with our makeup,
Yeah.
and and where we were at what time and who was there and what was the first response or not the first response and what
Yeah.
happened at, like, there's so we still don't know. This is what you're
Yeah.
doing. This is your
Yeah.
research. We're still trying to
Yes.
figure this out.
I am. Hopefully I'll get there, but yeah, I will.
Yes. Okay, so cleaning. This is a
Mm.
term. This is a term that I think this is your term. I think this is your
Mhm.
term because you came up with cleaning, clean trauma to counter what is written about with dirty trauma. Is
Yeah.
this right? So
It,
this is your baby?
it is. This is my
Yeah.
baby, which has come up
Yes.
again from reading Resma Manicom's work, but he talks about dirty pain and clean pain. And I wanted to change this idea of, well, if there is dirty pain and clean pain, well, why don't we just clean our trauma? And it came with the idea that, and I'm still, I feel the more I have conversations about it, the more I refine it. And this is, what is called research. In this instance,
Mhm.
this is all me search. Um, but the theory that can we ever eradicate a traumatic experience or an event? Can we eradicate it? And so this is what I'm still sitting with. And I don't know if there's data out there, if someone did. Is it ongoing? Especially now that data shows that there can be intergenerational trauma that goes back 14 generations. Sometimes we're dealing with stuff beyond our own life in this body. So with that in mind, it was the case of, well, let's make a choice. Why don't, the same way we constantly have to clean our house, our car, our bodies, is this something that we can continuously do? Because we will be reactivated and re-triggered. And so the invitation is that it's continuous, meaning that sometimes we might slip back. And when I say slip back, we might slip back in operating in a way that is not who we really are, that decontextualized trauma that comes out as personality. There might be parts of my personality that come up that aren't actually who I am. And so I'm going to clean it. Now, I will say the other part then is that I did a documentary, a short series of which I've released some episodes on YouTube, where there's actually someone who comes in to share their story and says, I actually don't like the concept of cleaning trauma because it makes me feel that it was dirty at some point. And then that
Mm.
brings up the shame. So
Mhm.
shame is a key theme that is coming up in my current research when it's attached to trauma that, interestingly, is not something that they have done. They are not the perpetrator of somebody else's pain or even their own. So that's a very interesting thing. And I know we had Brene Brown really bring shame into our vocabulary in a way that
Mhm.
doesn't make us wince. But I'm
Mhm.
still keen to see the link and therefore the opportunity it has with trauma. So I also want to give that perspective, is that someone says, well, actually, it
Mhm.
makes me feel that there's something dirty about it. And then we go back to the meanings we've given things. My
Mhm.
body is dirty after I've done a workout. I have done the work. Shame resilience is a big part of what's coming out and will come out in future work that I do, which is for me not to go and hide in shame. When a
Mhm.
baby is born, is the baby dirty because the baby has blood and mucus and things
Mhm.
that protected the baby?
Hmm.
So the cleaning our trauma is it feels like a work in progress, but for now I'm still sticking with it. But
Mhm.
easily it could be clearing, cleansing,
Mhm.
noting that we live in a world not just binary but of contrast. So there is
Mhm.
contrast to the opposite of most
Mhm.
of the things that we say.
And I just had I had the association that I had when I saw the word and the concept was healing.
Yeah,
A type of healing from our
yeah.
trauma. And but to heal, one must go through the steps that you talk
Hmm.
about, right?
Yeah,
So we have to acknowledge, we have to awaken,
yeah,
and we have to transform.
yeah.
And we can't heal from something we don't know we need to heal from. So
Yeah,
this acknowledgement and this awareness, we are aligned in
yeah,
the work that you're doing, and the work that what this show is about is,
yeah,
how do we have the courage to go about
mm,
this work?
yeah. Oh, it's a good question. So those three steps that you just mentioned, the acknowledge, awaken, and whether that's awareness and transformation, I feel humanity, the continuity of humanity in the form as we know it is relying on those two things, the first two steps. The third, I feel, is me being cheeky and rebellious and asking people to transform it. Because what I'm asking them to do is to not, well, once again, I don't want to make it binary. To transfer might not be the only other option. But if you transform it, you can actually contribute to the world becoming that better place, that loving space you talk about as the reason why I've created this podcast. That's the gift we give. And I'm suggesting, rightly or wrongly, that there is a gift in what may have happened, even though we're not taking blame or responsibility. The courage. Whew, where does the courage come from? You know how you mentioned earlier that some of the things we would say to ourselves, we wouldn't say to people we love. I find courage can come from looking at the people you love. They don't have to be people who are in different generations to you. I truly believe that as a species, and I know that there are some people that truly have a brain imbalance and therefore they may not carry the same emotion. Our capacity and want and need for love is high. You can go and get whoever you think is the meanest human in the world. They have someone, it could be a dog, it could be a snake, a cat, that they love wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, they could be out doing harm to humans. They have this capacity to love. I believe courage comes from that. It comes from that. I mean, and I feel I've just said something in a different way to what we hear all the time, is it's all about love, and it is about love. But if you just need to break it down for those who are cerebral and want to break it down and not just go with intuition and feeling, the person, the people, the animal, the thing you love the most, imagine you were doing this work for them in some capacity. We probably still need to go map out why you think you're doing it for them. But I promise you, if you weren't here, you are leaving a world that they continue to exist in. You find courage from that.
Yes. So you have given me back a memory of when our kids were young and I was going through a very difficult time, and I didn't feel that I was worth feeling better because of the place that I was in. And I distinctly remember, and I started using this in my work with adults as well after I got through this, was the reason my kids became the reason that I needed to do what I needed to do to find myself, to find my way back. And when I found my way back, I didn't feel that I wasn't worthy anymore, right? That was the depression talking.
Yeah.
And so anyways, that just came screaming at me. I
No,
just
I'm
to
glad you
agree, we
shared.
have to draw on. Yes, if we don't have the resources ourselves, and when it comes to trauma, it does take a lot of courage, and
Yeah.
it's scary to admit to ourselves. It's scary to talk to others about it. We question ourselves.
Yeah.
Did what happened really happen?
Yeah.
Did I just make this up? Particularly when we
Yeah.
have systems that are completely just gaslighting and
Yeah.
not valid, and the secret systems, right, that are
Yes.
keeping everything. So I guess what you're saying is we have to draw on the love,
Yeah.
the empathy.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say anything, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Anything we can to
Yeah.
take this first step to
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah. And I love that we've gone that back to front. You started to mention all these things and you said anything, but sometimes, and it could be listeners, and I think I was there as well, if we'd started with anything, some people can struggle, especially where disassociation happens. Like they just think, oh, but where? There's no one. And, you know, that's why I mentioned pets. I mean, for some people, it could be trees. Like this is where having different perspectives. It's funny, I was part of my research as well, came across this attachment theory, and a decolonizing perspective of attachment theory that we've typically heard is how people attach to their parents. Actually, how do we attach to land? What's the attachment we have to the sea, to fire, to earth? So this is where my invitation is for people to become rebelliously curious on how they think. So for those who say, well, I don't have anyone, I promise
Mm-hmm.
you, you have something at least
Mm-hmm.
that you love.
So how does, from your perspective, and this
Mm.
could be personal or through your research and the work that you're doing, how do people start?
Mm.
It sounds so simple, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem, it's not.
You start easy. And when you say start, how do they start clearing their
Yeah,
trauma?
yeah.
Yeah. You start really easy. And let me tell you how you start easy. You start easy because the next time you find yourself in a cycle or a pattern, something that keeps on happening, you're like, why do I keep on going to jobs where I keep on working with this absolute a-hole and blah? Or why does this always happen to me in relationships? Why do I never get the raise? And once again, I say this with no charge.
Mm-hmm.
The world, as you currently see it, will offer you the opportunity to get started. And then the invitation is to get curious,
Mm-hmm.
not to blame yourself, but to get curious. Why does this keep happening? And if you do this in a place without trying to blame anybody, yourself, the manager, just stop and get curious. I promise you, your body, your mind will give you the wisdom. That's the first one, cycles or patterns. Another place to get started is the work of Bessel van der Kolk. The body keeps the score.
Yeah.
I have a rotator cuff injury in my right shoulder. I had it from when I gave birth to my daughter 17 years ago and constantly carrying her that my alignment is off. It should only hurt when I'm exerting a lot of pressure in the gym or carrying weights. When my right shoulder starts hurting from just having a conversation or thinking, it's because it's one of the weakest spots in my body. And something has happened in my mind, either at a conscious or subconscious level, that has gone to that point. My body has kept the score and it will tell me that there's something bothering me. Then I stop and I get curious. What is it? And sometimes I've forgotten that it's the argument I had with a potential stranger over cutting me off in the car park. And then you need to start asking another question, get radically honest. Why am I bothered about that? Oh, it's because you don't like people cutting you off when you're speaking. Why am I bothered about that? Oh, it's because you never were allowed to speak. I mean, I'm saying this quite fast and
Mm-hmm.
you do the work you do, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to give this in language to people that they can apply.
Mm-hmm.
But you start doing it because your body will tell you. Ask high quality questions, answer with radical honesty, and then please note there are a whole host of modalities out there, whether it's talk
Yes.
therapy, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
somatic kind of dancing or yoga.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you start. But I promise you, the world and your body will give you many opportunities to start.
And wouldn't you say that there is some of this, I totally agree, go easy. And there's
Mm,
some of this we can do, we can take these steps on our own,
yeah,
but it's not uncommon to be flooded with
yeah,
emotion, to dissociate, to
yeah.
depersonalize,
Mm,
to be disconnected from ourselves, to go fetal. And
yeah.
that's when we really want to seek some professional support
Yes.
to have as a container and as a guide to go through what is a, well, everyone's process is different, and it's so important for people to take whatever steps they can take
Yeah.
um, towards this cleaning and
Yeah.
cleansing.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think it's part of the work. Sometimes we become so disembodied, we don't even know what works for us. But start at the pace you can. I'm still
Hmm.
working through cleaning my
Yeah.
trauma. I go on stage, and I only found out yesterday that when I go on stage and if I talk about the experience I mentioned of being a child, I actually just think I'm stating facts. What I haven't done is explained my experience. And that's because
Mm,
that's how slow I need to take it. There's a
right.
difference. Yeah.
Mm. That's such an important distinction.
Mm.
And having grace and compassion for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those of us who are either working with professionally or in personal relationships with people who we either know there has been trauma or we have an inkling, is everyone can talk about it in different ways. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I was just in the other room and talking to one of our admin, and she told me about one of my clients who had called for an administrative issue and shared with our support staff a big part of her trauma.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was talking to our team and saying, well, this is how some people process it,
Yes.
is wherever they find someone who might feel trusted or is connected to a trusted
Yes.
source or is just as
Yeah.
listening. That's part of the process of working through it, even if
Yes.
it catches us off guards at times.
I mean, and that is grace.
Yeah.
Isn't that grace that you were able to give, and but you are able to give that from the work that you are doing. And this is the invitation for us all to do it, because I know, and there are some people that can get flustered, and you get it because they weren't able to prepare. But
Mm-hmm.
whoever shared that needed to share that, and obviously felt that was a safe place to
Mm-hmm.
do it. So I love that you gave them that teachable moment, because it will happen again.
And yes, and I was also reflecting on myself of Dan in the office and then Dan out in the world, and really trying to continue to merge the two, because
Mm,
it's much easier for Dr. Dan to give this explanation with empathy and compassion. But if I, in the world, when you run into someone who what we would call has more looser boundaries and doesn't
mm,
know where things start and stop, which is a very common um, result of trauma, with someone being
mm.
violated emotionally, physically, and beyond. That's the common response, and it's like, it's. I guess I'm saying this to myself and to everyone, for us to have that compassion, because all of these behaviors, all of these reactions, they come from somewhere. They don't
Correct.
just show up.
Correct. And then here's the thing, though, because that person who might have looser boundaries and is doing something, the other person who reacts, whether unkindly or violently, they've got something as well. And this is the reason why the work is important, because
Yeah.
we need at least one of the two of you to be cleaning your trauma, so you can really open that space for grace, in
Hmm.
the hope that your reflection of that will change something in them as well.
Yes.
And this is the bit, and my fiance, who I love dearly, it's amazing to watch him on the road when he completely loses his shit because
Yeah.
someone's cut him off on
Yeah.
the road.
Yeah.
and and when I have the window, I just say, I don't know, they could be having a bad day, I could be wrong, but maybe they
Yeah.
just needed to rush to go somewhere.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes. Well, and you're bringing it around to, as I talked about in reading um, your bio in the intro, is healing our individual trauma so we can heal the collective. And I
Yeah.
think that's also what you were just representing.
Yeah.
I might
Correct.
be slow on the uptake here, which is
Good.
to, in each moment, if we can regulate ourselves
Yeah.
to respond in a compassionate and empathic, a curious way,
Yeah.
and give this individual who is used to getting certain types of responses to their
Yeah.
reactions, we can
Yeah.
raise the vibration and
Oh,
we can provide an ounce of healing to them.
yeah. Yeah, that was just a beautiful symphony. There's nothing to add. That that is that is the
Hmm.
message. Yeah,
It just amazing. Like, first of all, everyone can't see your smile, and when you radiate, you really
yeah. Oh,
radiate, um, which is so nice to see.
yeah.
And
I'm feeling it
yeah,
all. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. I'm feeling it.
And here we are with I'm in the Bay Area on Tuesday, and you're in Australia on Wednesday, and it's like, it's just so amazing that these types of experience can
Yeah,
can occur
yeah,
um, in our modern world.
yeah. Oh,
Okay, so as we wind down here, we're just about to that question which we're coming to. But before, what is your what is this one thing you want to leave our listeners with today?
hmm. This one came to me quite easily and quickly, and I can find myself fighting it, saying, "Yemi, that's lame." So I'm going to share it anyway because I wanted to
Good.
be vulnerable. What I want listeners to leave with today is that you are deeply loved, like deeply, deeply loved by someone, by something. And if you can just continue to believe that, the work and the courage will come effortlessly.
Mm.
Yeah, deep breath.
Yeah, we'll let that sink in.
Yeah.
Man, that's an incredible ending to our conversation. But I still, my
Mm.
gosh, I got to ask you the next question. I got to ask you the final question, but that was beautiful.
Well, we gave a
Okay.
pause, so that's
Yeah,
okay.
we give a pause. Okay, here we go.
Mm.
Are you ready, Yemi,
Let's
for the
go.
parent footprint moment question?
Shake it out. Yep.
Okay, here we go. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual or as a parent or even an awareness of your own parents. And that new awareness had a positive impact on your life,
Mm.
your kids, and or those you love.
This is another easy one. I have a 10-year-old son. His dad, my ex-husband, lives in America, Arizona, and I'm here in Australia. And with the work I do on cleaning trauma, it was really important, especially during COVID, that my son, then 7 years old, went to live with his dad.
Mm,
And that was a big deal, especially as the
mhm,
world has said that the mother is the primary carer. And I saw the joy on his face, and it was awesome. And he was meant to be there for a year, but lockdowns made it difficult to go and get him. So it came up to almost 2 years. And it was time for him to come back to me in Australia. But at this point, he said, Mum, I really love America. I'd love to go back in a year. And my heart cracked and it
mm,
broke. And I was so proud of myself for saying, I love this boy
mm,
so much. And I love his dad. And we have a great relationship that I can make this work. I can go hybrid. Now, he has since changed his mind again. And I think this is the joy of a kid that can change their mind. But that was the moment that I came in as a parent, which was for a little while, he's going to be under my care, either on my own or with his father. But it was that acknowledgement that he's in my care till such a time he's able to fly off. And the joys of conscious co-parenting across the seas is an aha moment that I weirdly remembered.
mm.
I'm a parent. Yeah.
Man,
A
to
big
be
one.
heartbroken and proud, right? At the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for sharing your story, your awakening story.
Mm.
And it sounds like you continue to awaken. It's
Yeah.
an ongoing process as you
Sure is.
continue to clean, as you are
Mm.
helping us all to think about trauma in a decolonized, decontextualized,
Yeah.
multiple lens ways to open up this
Mm.
conversation. Um, the field, we would say, is still in its infancy, and we have hopefully promise and so much to still learn, but also so much to learn that has been around for centuries in cultures
Mm.
that
Yeah.
are not in the peer reviewed journals,
Yeah.
the healers that aren't licensed in the
Yeah.
States or
Yeah.
in the UK or in
Yeah.
Australia. There's so much for us
Mm.
to learn with radical curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Yemi. So tell everyone, you've got so much going on. We didn't talk about your businesses, your coaching, your former podcast. Did you get the memo? Because I didn't effing get it, which is also a book. Like, there's so much to you. You're so humble and modest. What should people? How should people keep up with
Yeah.
you and what you're doing?
I'd say Instagram and LinkedIn. I love the containers I've created there, especially Instagram. There's a lot of radical honesty that goes on there, but it's grace and compassion, and I'm trying to find ways to do that just with written text. So I'd love for people to join that community and yeah, share any aha moments that came out for them on this. And I will be in the States next month, and I'm going to be around a lot more as I start to do more speaking engagements. So I hope to meet people in person also.
Awesome. And I did hear that there was a time that you were thinking of relocating to the
Yeah.
States, but yeah,
Yeah.
still
No, and
in the works.
still am,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a
Yeah.
hybrid. I'm just going to create a new way of being.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this is not the end for us. I hope we can stay connected, and shall see where it takes us.
Indeed. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I know you are thinking about many humans you know who would benefit from listening to this conversation and Yemi's wisdom. So please share this episode with all of those people you're thinking about, all those people you love and care about. Thank you for being a part of our community and bringing your people to our community. Thank you for your rating and your reviewing. It does mean a lot. You know what I'm going to ask you to do? 2 final things. Do your best to be that person you want your child to become. And ask yourself the guiding question: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummer Man, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.